I'm a little giddy because I get you guys back. All right, so we are back in action, Science 8B now, okay? So we've finished first semester and we're on to second semester, and we have some really cool things to learn about, so be prepared. One of my favorite things that we're going to talk about today and this week and next week is something that you guys are really going to enjoy, okay? Take a look at these pictures and see if you can figure out what we might talk about. Maybe some of you guys already know what this is. Hopefully you do, because I'm sure you've heard it in 7th grade, and 6th grade, and 5th grade, and so forth. But we are going to talk about DNA and ultimately genetics, okay? Sorry for the blaring sun in my face, but that's okay. You don't need to focus on me. Focus on the video. All right, so we're going to start with some visuals, because I love visuals, and then I'm going to follow them up with some more of my details. Now remember, you're always watching these mini lessons, Howie's mini lessons, before you go and read through the information in your unit. I want you to start off with watching the mini lesson and taking notes, and then going through and reading through your entire unit and following up with those notes. Maybe you find more that's in your unit that maybe I go over. I try to go over the big picture things, and there's going to be more details in your unit, okay? So this is a good place to start, and then you can go a little bit deeper as you read into your unit. So watch this first video. This gives you guys some good background on genetics.
Your body is made up of 50 trillion cells. Cells come in many different varieties with many different functions. But inside almost every cell is a nucleus containing 99.9% of your genes, and mitochondria containing a few more genes. All told, you have nearly 20,000 genes. Your genes are small parts of a long molecule called DNA, or deoxyribonucleic acid. If you lined up all of the DNA containing all of your genes, it would measure 6 feet long. But it's coiled so tightly that it fits in just one cell nucleus. DNA is a double-stranded molecule composed of sugar, phosphate, and 4 different bases: adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine. These bases spell out the language known as the genetic code. The number and order of these 4 bases determine, for example, whether you are a chimp, a cow, a banana, or a human. Most genes are recipes for making specific proteins. These recipes are passed down from parents to children, from generation to generation. When someone says, "You have your father's hair," what they mean is, you appear to have inherited a gene or genes from your father that makes a protein that instructs your hair follicle cells to produce hair that curls like your father's. But they usually opt for the shorter version. Genes tell a cell how to function and what traits to express. More specifically, gene regulators turn different genes on and off in different cells to control cell function. The long molecules of DNA containing your genes are organized into pieces called chromosomes. Different species have different numbers of chromosomes. Humans usually have 46 chromosomes, 2 sets of 23, or simply 23 pairs of chromosomes. Chimpanzees have 2 sets of 24, or 24 pairs of chromosomes. Rhesus monkeys have 21 pairs of chromosomes. Cows have 30 pairs of chromosomes. Chickens have 39 pairs. Fruit flies have 4 pairs, and bananas have 11 pairs. So, what percentage of the DNA in your chromosomes do you share with other species? You share 93% of your DNA with the rhesus monkey, and 98.5% with our friend chimpanzee. How about with other humans? 99.5%. So, what makes us different from one another? Well, for one thing, SNPs.
So we'll get into that later, the whole SNPs thing, yes. So let's move back and let's kind of follow up with some of that with some details. So, not those kind of genes, no. We're going to talk about the genes that are inside, are basically in our chromosomes within our DNA. So they are instructions and directions. They're basically a template, a blueprint. However you want to look at it, sometimes it's easier to think of it that way if you like thinking of it as a template for what's going to happen and how your genes are, or how your body's going to work. That's what's going to happen with your genes. They tell your body what to do. So however you want to think about it, your genes explain how to make you, you. So when you're born is when your genes first start kicking in, obviously, and they're going to make your skin color and your eye color and your hair color and how your hair, if it's curly or straight, okay, all those different things come from your genes. Some genes are expressed right away. Some genes take a little bit more time. Eye color, for instance, if you guys didn't know, when a mother first gives birth to a baby, all babies have kind of a bluish slate eye, colored eye. Some have dark brown, especially if you're a darker skin color. But typically, that eye color is not what it's going to be until 6 months of age. So what may look like a kind of a slate blue color eyes could turn into green, could even turn into brown. So that's one thing that, some genes don't kind of express themselves right away. But ultimately, they are instructions or directions on how to make everyone individual, okay? Now, DNA, we've talked a lot about in that video, but also I'm going to touch on this quite a bit, and especially in our live class. But DNA is something so important that each one of us have, okay? I want you guys to think about, by the way, look at this lovely DNA strand. It's made of candy. Yum. Okay, so think about some of the things that you might know about DNA. Kind of think about that as we talk. Because DNA, there's so much information when we talk about DNA. First of all, we can talk about where it is, okay? It's located in the nucleus of all cells in these chromosomes that are tightly wound up, and that DNA is basically what makes up those chromosomes. You can unravel it and you'll see this double helix. Now it's called a double helix because there's 2 strands and it turns in kind of a helical shape. And so within this double helix are these bases, okay? And it mentioned that in the video. Adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine. These are base pairs that make up different genes, okay? Everyone's genes are very unique. Obviously, if you are an identical twin, then you are the only one that will have identical genes to somebody else. Everyone else is basically 99.5, like it said, % different. So that 0.5% makes such a difference. I mean, yes, we all have 2 legs and 2 arms and stuff like that, but think about the looks of each one of us and why we are so different in our personalities. So that 0.5% makes a huge difference. It's all of that variation. Now your DNA comes from both parents. You get some of those genes from your mom, some of those genes from your dad, okay? So it houses all of the genetic material in your body, okay? Pretty cool, pretty important, pretty awesome. We're going to talk more about that in class, so make sure you guys read through your unit because there's a lot more information that we're going to touch on as well, okay? Now I do want to touch on something that you guys aren't going to necessarily see in your guys' unit, but this is something that's going to play when you guys get into high school, a lot about genetics, and we talk about genotypes and phenotypes. So there are 2 different genes. There's 2 genes. You get one from your father and one from your mother, right? When you actually talk about those genes, those individual genes that you get, one from your mom, one from your dad, that's called the genotype. So say you get a blue-eyed gene from your mom, which we typically represent as a little b, and you get a brown-eyed gene from your dad, a big B, okay? Your genotype would be just that. You would have a big B and a little b, okay? Your genotype are the genes that you get. But the phenotype is a little different. The expression of the genotype is termed phenotype, okay? So for example, hair color, weight, presence or absence of a disease, that is a phenotype. What physically shows up? So remember, I gave you the example of a genotype would be big B, little b. So you've got a big B from your dad, which is brown eyes, and a little b from your mom, which is blue eyes. But your phenotype is brown eyes, because brown eyes is always dominant. So no matter what, if you get a brown eye trait, you're going to have brown eyes. So that phenotype for your eyes would be brown eyes. Whatever you see physically, okay, that is what your phenotype is. So think of pheno as a physical trait, like physically you can see it. Genotype are just the genes. So I wanted to make sure that that's kind of a little clear, because you guys are gonna hear about that a little bit more. Let's take a look at some more visuals about the phenotypes.
Your observable traits, also known as your phenotypes, result from the interaction between your genes and the environment. This interaction begins in the womb and continues throughout your life. Differences in some phenotypes, like height, are determined mostly by genes. If you had short parents and grandparents, you probably don't tower over your peers, though environmental factors like nutrition can have some effect on your height. Genes also play a role in whether you have a healthy body weight. But diet and exercise can profoundly affect how much you weigh. How genes influence your personality is less understood. You can now learn about over 500,000 SNPs in your genome all at once. And every day, scientists are learning more and more about how some of these SNPs affect your phenotype. Getting to know your genome can help you understand a little better why you are the way you are, and in what ways you're similar to or different from your family, friends, and neighbors.
All right, there you have it. So a little bit more on phenotype, what you see. Don't worry about SNPs. We're not going to talk about that in 8th grade. That's something that you'll get to when you guys are in high school. So genotype and phenotype. So the phenotype, again, blue eyes, what you see, but the genotype is little b, little b. It's a recessive trait, which we're going to talk about in just a moment. The phenotype for brown eyes is brown eyes, because you can see that. The genotype is big B, little b, or big B, which is B. Big B is dominant. Let's talk about dominant versus recessive, and then we will be done. So a dominant allele is expressed even if it's paired with a recessive allele, meaning no matter what, if you get that brown eye trait, it's dominant, you're going to have brown eyes. A recessive allele is only visible when you have two recessive alleles. So think about this. This example right here says the effects of a dominant allele, big B, are seen even if it's present with contrasting recessive allele. So big B, like the dominant trait here is brown, okay? The recessive trait is gray, and we signify those by a capital letter versus a lowercase letter. So if this cat has two big B's, obviously it's going to be brown. If it has a big B and a little b, it still has that recessive trait, but because it has that dominant trait, it's still going to be brown. The only way you're going to get a gray cat is if you have two of those recessive traits, little b, okay? We will talk about that a lot more in class, but I wanted to give you guys just kind of a brief little thing on dominant versus recessive. But read through your unit and you will get a good picture of that, and we'll discuss it further in class. So I know you guys want more, and we will have more, of course, but that's enough for now. So I hope that you guys, that gives you a good start on just a little bit about what we are talking about. All right, see you soon.